Fundamentalism is an American Protestant religious movement which peaked in the 1920s, originating in the North but gathering mostly Southern followers along the Bible Belt. Fundamentalists opposed modernist development which interfered with their religious identities and worldviews. Their beliefs centered on the concept of savior, savior for oneself, and savior for others. The movement obtained its name from 12 small volumes called The Fundamentals, in which the anonymous authors detailed the necessity for accepting the basic Christian doctrines, such as biblical inerrancy, divinity of Jesus, the virgin birth, the belief that Jesus' death redeemed mankind, as well as the second coming of Christ, without question. In addition, these volumes attack the theory of evolution, which originated from Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species, a book in which Mr. Darwin developed his theory on how mankind evolved from primates. As this information was not expressly stated in the Bible, fundamentalists disregarded it or thought of it as a complete fabrication. Leading fundamentalist William Jennings Bryan, in his speech Origin of Man, stated, "It is not sufficient to say that some believers in Darwinism retain their belief in Christianity. Some survive smallpox. As we avoid smallpox because many die of it, so we should avoid Darwinism because it leads many astray. Darwinism leads to denial of God." Instead of accepting Darwinism as the theory of evolution, fundamentalists adopted creation science or creationism, which chronicled the creation of man in sole relation to the book of Genesis.
The movement cemented itself with the establishment of the World Christian Fundamentals Association in 1919, an organization which led the fundamentalist movement for the next 10 years. The fundamentalist title was coined 1 year later by a newspaper and defined a fundamentalist as being an individual who battled royal and fundamentals. Throughout America, Protestant churches became internally separated into modernist and fundamentalist sects. The Northern Modernist and Southern Fundamentalist rivalry reached its apex during what is known as the Scopes Monkey Trial, which dealt with the issue of teaching Darwin's evolution theory in Southern schools. Tennessee was one of the Southern states that had passed an act, the Butler Act, banning the education for children to learn the Darwinist evolutionary theory. The law, designed to prevent the teaching of evolution in public schools, was not the first of its kind. Oklahoma had passed a similar statute in 1923, while several other states had considered doing so. Outrage as to the possible constitutionality violation caused by such laws, the American Civil Liberties Union funded an anti-evolution test case, persuading a Tennessee biology teacher, John T. Scopes, to deliberately defy the law by teaching the theory of evolution to his high school students. On April 24th, Scopes gave a lecture on evolution in his class and was consequently arrested 2 weeks later. The Scopes Monkey Trial that ensued became the sensation of the decade, as well as one of the most publicized trials of the 20th century, garnering immense interest throughout the country. Participating in the trial, William Jennings Bryan was a well-known populist, a fundamentalist, as well as a 3-time candidate for the president. From a young age, Bryan had been a devoted Presbyterian, harboring a growing devotion for religion and the Bible especially. He believed only in the literal interpretation of the Bible and refuted any evolutionist theory based mostly on his ignorance of the subject.
The politician even drafted a resolution in 1924 that would be later passed by the state of Florida, which called for the suspension of Darwinist teachings in public schools. The passing of another bill, the Butler Act, made teaching evolution illegal in the state of Tennessee. The act was passed mainly due to the influence exerted by Bryan's Is the Bible True lecture on the members of the legislature. Hearing about John T. Scopes' indictment, Bryan accepted the call to serve as a prosecutor for the case, and submit himself to Clarence Darrows, a prolific defense lawyer representing John T. Scopes' questioning. Darrow was an agnostic, someone that does not personally believe in God but does not deny his existence. William Jennings Bryan beat his gums as a Bible expert, and Darrow's clever questioning led Bryan to admit he did not believe everything in the Bible, which shocked his followers, who resorted to a Bronx cheer to show their displeasure. The trial took place at the Rhea County Courthouse on July 10th, with Judge John Ralston presiding over the case, and lasted for 2 weeks. It was also appropriately considered by most a publicity stunt. The main reporter and commentator of the Scopes Monkey trial, H.L. Mencken, was also one of the most distinguished literary critics of his time. Although many believed his critiques to be too brazen, they are often very accurate. And how? The Scopes Monkey trial was immensely critiqued by Mencken. He commented that the world is displeased with Mr. Darrow because, in his appalling cross-examination of the mountebank Bryan, he did some violence to the theological superstitions that millions of Americans cherish. I do not know how many Americans entertain the ideas defended so ineptly by poor Bryan, but probably the number is very large. Not only are they not supported by the known facts, they are in direct contravention of the known facts. Mencken's witty criticism of the monkey trial, as he had labeled it, effectively summarized the reigning majority opinion after the conclusion of the trial. At the conclusion of the trial, John Scopes was found guilty and fined $100. But the verdict was later overturned due to a technicality. 5 days after the culmination of the trial, William Jennings Bryan died in his sleep from complications caused by diabetes and fatigue, probably due to the stress of the trial and Darrow's questioning.
Following the trial, fundamentalism suffered a massive decline in public support and opinion. Most Americans, especially those from the industrialized North, viewed the fundamentalist movement as appealing only to backwards and rural areas of the South and Midwest, the same areas that advocated prohibition and the Ku Klux Klan. Drinking, jazz, and religious tolerance became the new interests of the sophisticated middle and upper classes. Anything that contradicted these ideas were backwards. The sophisticated generation that began to emerge detested the nativism, religious intolerance, and anti-intellectualism of the fundamentalist movement. By the end of the 1920s, fundamentalist movement had significantly diminished in size and influence, at least for the time being. Evolution had won.
The defense has brought to Hillsborough at great expense and great inconvenience 6 noted scientists. Their testimony is basic to the defense of my client. For I intend to show this court that what Bertram Cates spoke quietly one spring morning in the Hillsborough High School is no crime. It is incontrovertible as geometry to any enlightened community of minds.
In this community, Colonel Drummond, and in this sovereign state, exactly the opposite is the case. The language of the law is clear, Your Honor. We do not need experts to question the validity of a law that is already on the books.
Well, what do you need? A gallows to hang him from?
That remark is an insult to this entire community.
And this community is an insult to the world. Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw from this case.
Mr. Drummond, you can't quit now.
Why not? You were ready to 5 minutes ago.
Colonel Drummond, what reasons can you possibly have?
Well, there are 200 of them. And if that's not enough, there's one more. I think my client has already been found guilty.
Is Mr. Drummond saying that this expression of an honest emotion will in any way influence the court's impartial administration of the law?
I say that you cannot administer a wicked law impartially. You can only destroy, you can only punish. And I warn you that a wicked law like cholera destroys everyone it touches, its upholders as well as its defiers.
Colonel Drummond.
Can't you understand that if you take a law like evolution and you make it a crime to teach it in the public schools, tomorrow you can make it a crime to teach it in the private schools, and tomorrow you may make it a crime to read about it, and soon you may ban books and newspapers. And then you may turn Catholic against Protestant, and Protestant against Protestant, and try to foist your own religion upon the mind of man. If you can do one, you can do the other, because fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy. and needs feeding. And soon, Your Honor, with banners flying and with drums beating, we'll be marching backward, through the glorious ages of that 16th century, when bigots burned the man who dared bring enlightenment and intelligence to the human mind.